Mike Page is up first. Not around anywhere. There we go. And nice, Mike.
Get that bit of cup of coffee.
Good morning, guys. Not really one of my strong suits doing this kind of thing, but we'll give it a shot. One of the biggest complaints I get from everybody is, I blew up my saw. Why did I blow up my saw?
No.
When I was 16, I started cutting wood with my grandfather.
That works for you.
First time I ran a saw out of gas, he reprimanded me very harshly. He said, you realize you just ran that saw without any oil on it for 20 seconds. I said, but it was running really good. He said, that's because it was running on vapor and not on fume. When you run your saw out of gas, the vapors are just gas. There's no oil in it. So for that 15-20 seconds, 5 times a day, you're looking at running your saw with no oil in it for 2 minutes a day, 300 days a year. You're running your saw a couple of hours a year with no oil in it, creating a lot of heat, and that is our biggest enemy in the chainsaw carving world. I know it's a pain in the ass to stop and fill it up. You're doing a lot of damage in 20 seconds. Personally, I've never blown up a saw. I've never had that problem. It's a lot cheaper to run your saw mix a little bit rich and have your carburetor adjusted for that than it is to buy a new saw. A little maintenance.
What do you mean by a little rich?
A lot of manufacturers now are recommending you run your saw 50 to 1. Right from the day mine's out of the box, I'm running mine 40 to 1 with synthetic oil. The carburetor from the factory is adjusted to run at 50 to 1. If you're not a carburetor man, run it to your saw shop and they'll hook it up for you, put it on the meter, and get the correct RPMs for the mixture that you are currently running in your saw. Along the lines of heat, everybody says, I'm burning out my bars. My carbon bars don't last for long enough. If you take the 5-10 minutes and adjust your chains to your bars, I have bars that I've been running for 1.5 years. As your bar is going around the radius of the nose, our carving bars come at a much sharper radius. Chainsaw is designed to have a smooth radius on a normal bar. Forgive me my drawing, I'm no artist by any means.
You want to do it up higher, Mike?
Erase all that, Mike.
Mike, do it up higher.
As we're going around the chain on our carving bar, we got the front of our tooth, we got the cutter, and then we have the heel of the tooth. The heel of the tooth is that high point right there. Because the radius is so sharp on the carving bar, it hits the heel of the tooth up, which is now higher than the next cutter of our chain. So we're getting a lot of friction from this point all the way down to here where the heel is now lower than the cutter of the next tooth. Through that whole 1-inch process, it's creating a lot of friction. Well, what some of the carvers have told everybody to do is to take the grinder and take off that 1/3 heel of the tooth. Just touch it with your 4-inch grinder. It takes that heel off and it eliminates all that extra heat. A lot of people run Oregon chain. If you're running the 91 VXL chain, it looks nice because your tooth is longer and you can sharpen it more often. But if you run the 91 VX chain, you don't even need to take that off because the tooth is short enough, the heel's not picked up to begin with. That is everybody's own personal preference, but the important thing is that we get rid of the heat.
Mike,
Yes?
they don't make the 91 VX anymore. The mold's broken, all you get is the VXL, so you've got to do that. You've got to do it manually.
Okay.
There's only a few places that have some left.
I was still able to get it. I didn't know they quit making it.
Well, good. Tell us where you get it. So,
No, I will probably now buy out what I can get for that reason.
Mike,
Yes, sir.
steel, they make the chain now.
Steel makes a quarter
The
pitch
quarter
carbon
pitch,
chain.
they make it with your back already knocked off. Costs you a couple extra pennies, but,
I personally don't care for quarter pitch chain. I do run the 3/8 low pro. I do this on every bar I run. Every chain I run, I take the back of the tooth off. It's very helpful in the bore cutting, even if we don't. It's not necessary on a normal bar. It's not necessary on a tuning bar. But for the 10 minutes it takes, it makes sponge cutting a whole lot nicer and friendlier on the bar. We need to get rid of that heat. Heat is our biggest enemy in the carving world. Everybody wants to be able to run a bigger bar on the smaller power heads. That's why they invented the skip tooth chain. Every cutter requires a certain amount of horsepower to get it to go through the wood. When you're not running enough power to get that chain at the correct speed, you're asking for a kickback to come up in your face. Well, if you're running a 18, 20-inch bar on a 2 horsepower saw, you're asking for trouble. But if the ability to run skip tooth chain, you have half the amount of teeth, which requires you can run a third less horsepower, which running with a longer bar gives us the ability to go completely through the wood without burying the tip. As soon as you bury the tip, you're creating more heat. Being able to go completely through gives you a lot flatter cut, your carbon stands straighter. Skip tooth also gives you the ability to fit sawdust in between the teeth. You get more sawdust out, you're not packing it in there as tight, you're getting less heat as well. Anybody is making skip tooth chain nowadays. If your saw is recommended for a 16 or 18-inch bar, if you're running skip tooth chain, now you can run a 24-inch bar without the extra load on your saw head. I run a lot of ported and polished power heads. What that does is jump the horsepower of your saw. Say from, if you're running steel and you're running a 440, if you have that ported and polished, you're bumping that up to, say, an 060 or a 600. Not quite the same as a 660, but what it's doing is giving you the power of a 660 with the weight of a 440. Weight is an issue, not so much in the morning, but at the end of the day. There's a lot of saw shops out there that will tune up your saw. Once you have it ported and polished, you need to have the carburetor work done. A couple $100 will have you a ported saw. They aren't louder because when you're bringing in more air, you need to be able to get more air out, so now you're opening up the mufflers. It may be an issue in certain environments, but if you have freedom like I do, you're getting a whole lot more horsepower with a lot less weight. And to me, it's economically sound to run that. As far as bars and chains, if you guys have any questions, just stop down by the workshop. I have the ability to show you physically how to dress your bars. This is one of my favorite tools. It's just a 1x30 belt sander. You get them anywhere for $49. It gives you the ability to keep your bars at a perfect 90-degree angle. A lot of people bring their saws to me to have them looked at. They say they're running hot. My chains are wearing funny. If you're not dressing your bar, you get that little lip all the way around the bar, and now your chain's running cockeyed. You're never going to get a straight cut. Just set your bar perfectly flat on there, and then roll it to follow the radius, the factory radius. You want to make sure you maintain that perfectly round shape, no matter what shape that is, a toonie, a dime, quarter, doesn't matter. And you can stand your bar up alongside there 90 degrees, and it takes the lip off the side of the bar. You take your chain, you hold that tooth against there and just tap it like that. The back of that tooth is gone. We eliminate the heat. 10 of these belts cost you $3. I've done it with a angle grinder, taking the teeth off. It's not quite as easy to regulate when you're trying to use that. This thing here, it's 180 grit. It doesn't eat too fast. You can do each one the same. Very, very simple. One of my favorite companies over the years is a company called Super Grip. We have 50 catalogs if anybody wants one. It's anything in the abrasive world. They have Sandoflex refills for $7.50. They're a very large distributor in the abrasive world. They've got a lot of specialty products, little sanding flap wheels. They have 4-inch flap wheels with a 6-inch extension, so we can get into certain areas that our Sandoflex heads can't reach it. I'm lazy. I don't like to brush. If I can't do it with a power tool, I don't like to do it. I press it on to the wife, let her do it. It's just the easiest way for me is to be able to find the right tool for the job. It may require a little bit of searching. It does really work out. Another one of my favorite tools is a band file. It gives me the ability to sand contours. I can't find them anywhere in the homeowner world. You go to any hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, nobody carries them. I can get any grit from 24 grit to 320 grit. You get 10 belts for $7. Basically push it down. The belt pops right off, you throw a new one on, you're back in business. They also work for taking down the teeth.
Where do you get the machine?
I've only been able to find them on the Makita website. If you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, they will special order it for you and charge you for it.
I think Log Home Supply.
Log Home Supply carries them.
I'm a quick carrier. Yeah, I got that.
Yeah, the ones, the band files, which is what that's called. There's different versions out there. A lot of them are 1/2 inch wide, and they mount onto your grinder. I bought a couple of them and threw them out the next day. They don't work they don't last to what I want to do with them. This one you can get in 1 1/8 wide and 3/8 wide. So, they carry all the belts for me. Another tool that these guys carry I've never seen before is a keyless chuck that screws onto your 4.5-inch die grinder. What that does is give me the ability to put one of these on a die grinder, which I'm very, very comfortable using. It's not long like a drill. It gets me into tighter places. For $25, I turn my die grinder that turns 25,000 RPMs into a compact sanding tool. A lot of people ask me where I got that power inverter that's in the toolbox of my truck. I've got a 5,000 watt power inverter. I plug in my lead cord and I've got 5,000 watts. I'm not listening to a generator. I'm not putting gas in a generator.
And boy, does it work. I've been running the PA off that thing. It's surprising how it's got.
You
What
need
batteries
to
do you have?
babysit it when it's really loud. It does have a low battery warning. We haven't heard that the last couple days. I've been running it for 10 hours and I didn't need to jump my truck.
I'm not sure why we couldn't hear the warning. It's a mystery.
But what it does is it converts power 12 volt or 24 volt to 110. It's just a convenience thing. I have a bunch of brochures here. They make them anywhere from 100 watts of power right on up to 5,000. They make pure sane inverters, which is true 110 power. The biggest one I could possibly get and put in my truck costs me $400. I have trouble finding a decent 5,000 watt generator for $400. It's a convenience factor. You pull up on a job site, you got 15-20 minutes worth of electric work you want to do. You plug in a lead cord, you move on.
You run it off your truck battery, or do you run it off a deep cycle battery?
I happen to have 2 heavy-duty diesel batteries in my truck, and it works very well for my application. We all go to shows, and we're all required to put up safety around our carving areas. First couple of years, I was wrestling around with that deer netting. It's plastic, it's not very flexible. It's a nuisance in my mind. I got on a couple of websites and I was driving by a golf course one day and I seen this big hanging net up there. And this stuff is designed to stop golf balls at driving ranges. It's very flexible. There's 17 different combinations that they make. You can do the quarter, you can do the 5/8 diamond, they make it on up to 2-inch holes. West Coast Netting out of California was the company I chose to use. This material, all said and done, was 21 cents a square foot. What they did was put 2-inch webbing all the way around my net with grommets every 2 feet so I could zip tie it up. What I ordered was an 8-foot piece, 100 feet long, with webbing all the way around it. Covers my 10 by 20. It cost me $96. It actually cost me more for the deer netting. That's a pain in the ass to use. But once I did my homework and found out what materials were out there for the job I needed, I don't even cut the zip ties, right? I just rip it down. The zip ties break. I rip it down, wad it up, throw it in a milk crate, throw it in a trailer, and I move on to the next show. At 21 cents a square foot, it's more than economical for what we do. I do have a line on a new hydraulic unit that's out there. It's 3 horsepower hydraulic with a it's a 4-horse electric motor, but by the time you get through right down to the saw blade, you're down to 3 horsepower. Same principle as the horsepower in your motor is not the same as the horsepower you get to the ground. Running a saw is the same way. I did not bring my old ugly one here. They were going to ship me a brand new one, and it got tied up in the snow somewhere between here and Washington yesterday. Hopefully it'll be here today, maybe tomorrow, if anybody wants to try it out. What it is a hydraulic motor that has been mounted in a Husky chainsaw body. They use the cylinder of the saw. It looks and feels like an actual chainsaw, but it has a hydraulic tail on it. I'd rather deal with a hydraulic tail as long as it's ergonomically comfortable to me. I'm used to holding a chainsaw. Personally, I don't care for the Stanley because it's not comfortable to me. I tried it out. I saw myself developing a wrist problem with it, and I'd rather work in 0 degrees than potentially harm my body. This is a prototype. The guy's designing it. I'm not getting paid to promote it. I just believe it's going to be a useful tool. My worst day this year was 22 degrees below 0 with a 15-mile-an-hour wind. I'd much rather work slow with an electric saw inside. I'm going to get just as much work done because if I'm outside in 22 below in the wind, after a half hour, 45 minutes, I'm inside getting warmed up again. I needed to come up with a saw that would do what we need to do indoors. I got to experiment a little bit and found that if you interchange some parts on Dolmar saws, you can actually do it yourself without having any machine parts. Basically what I do is you change out a spur sprocket on an electric saw for a rim and drum system. The drums are running $22, the sprockets run about $38. But what I was able to do was increase the diameter of the spur sprocket almost 3 times. Now you've got a stock saw that's running 2,600 feet per minute, and you've been able to change that to around 5,000 feet per minute. The chain is designed to move that dust out of your way. At 2,600 feet a minute, I was nowhere near happy with what it was doing. No, it's not a blockout saw. When you're shaving and pushing stuff back, texturing, all that fun stuff you want to take your time doing, you don't want to be outside doing it, it works really well for that application. There is no perfect saw out there, but it's closer than what was available stock. For 50, 60 bucks, you can swap it over yourself. I've had one for 1.5 years. I haven't been able to burn it out yet, but I'm not overloading it by trying to cut 16 inches worth of wood with it either. It's not what it's designed for. Does anybody have any questions on anything? I really had intentions of doing a demonstration with the hydraulic unit, and that didn't show up, so I'm a little short on time here, but
I said something about when you cut the backs of the cutters off your tooth. I mean, if you didn't get them exactly perfect, would it really matter?
no, sir. They are nowhere near as important as your rakers or your depth gauge, whatever you want to call them. If you get a little carried away and run it forward, all that means is you're not going to be able to sharpen it as much. But a lot of times, for me, I'm running a 3/8 low pro chain on an 8 horsepower chainsaw. The chassis was not designed to take that kind of pain. After a couple of dozen bears, I ripped the drivers off the chain and I still have over half the tooth left. I get that chain for $15. That chain has made me $7,000-8,000. I have no right to complain that I broke it. Chains are not going to last forever. You know, I'd much rather wear out an $8, $12, $20 chain than a $120 tuning box. You know, I run a lot of 20-inch tuning bars on my big horsepower, but I'm running a chain that is designed for a 2 horsepower saw. The combination works well for me, but that's not what it's made to do. We are not using saws as they are intended for use. So do we really have a right to complain that we're breaking them? The manufacturers say these are made to cut straight. You're supposed to have your tip out of the wood. Do any of us do that? No. Once in a while I do, but it feels wrong, I know that.
Mike,
Yes, sir.
you're gonna say something about the cold treatment of the bars?
There's certain guys that are producing them, and they're gonna sell them. So I really don't wanna,
You're gonna talk about maybe the value of it to people for,
well, there are guys out there that are having the bars cryogenically frozen. What they do is bring the bar temperature down to 300 degrees below Celsius. And what that does is change the molecular structure of the metal. The bars are 4 times harder and they last 4 times longer. There is companies out there that if you want to send your bars to them, they'll do it for you. Is it cost effective? Yeah. I mean, I drill out my bars. You might see a few flying around the carbon grounds that have a bunch of holes down through them. I've done that for friends of mine. What that does, there again, it's removing heat. It dissipates heat in the bar. It gives me the ability to do this because my bar is not high siding on sawdust. Sawdust fills in the holes, and it gives me more room in the curve cut than was originally there. Is it a pain in the ass? No. If you have good quality bits, cobalt, tungsten drill bits, and a very slow drill press, it's very simple to do. Lay it out exactly how you want it. Drill them out. You will avoid the warranty of your bar. I don't care who makes it. They're not happy that you try to improve on their bar. When I spend $70, $80 on a bar, I want to try and get 4 years out of it. Bars are not disposable like chains are to me. My saws get a little old. They don't want to pump oil as well as they used to. Take your bar, put a little drill bit next to the hole where the oil goes into your bar. Ream that hole out a little bit. That is not hardened metal back there. It's very easy to drill. Anybody can do it. Don't make a big hole in it. Just go up a size or 2 so the oil flows easier, especially in the wintertime. At the end of the day, I like to loosen my chain up. It doesn't do a damn thing for the chain, but it does a lot for the bar because it reminds me in the morning to take my Sawzall blade and just rake the top of that bar out. Gets all the sawdust in there, lets the oil flow through it a lot easier. It's just a good habit to get into. You know, like flipping your bars over once in a while. Everybody says, oh, it takes time to take your bar off. Well, if you see somebody's bar that has a big notch in the bottom of it, they never flip that bar over and the chain keeps beating on the bottom, beating on the bottom. Rotate your bars. They're designed so you can use both top and bottom. Everybody's pushing on the bottom of that bar, pushing on the bottom of it. As soon as that stellite wears at the end of your tip and starts on the hardened steel, and you get that divot in there, it's going to mess up your chain on a regular basis. It's so much easier just to flip it over once in a while. Do your bar maintenance. It literally takes me 15 seconds to dress a bar if you have the right tool to do it. If you don't have one of these belt sanders, take an 8-inch sanding disc you can get through Super Grit, glues right onto your table saw. Take an old table saw blade, slap some sandpaper on the side, and you have a perfect 90-degree to run your bar up again. Watch the teeth. It's going to bite you if you don't pay attention. This thing has not bit me in. You know, it runs 3,000 RPMs. You put your hand right up there and won't even sand the hair off, but it definitely does the job on the metal. Anything else I'm forgetting, Dave? Yeah, you can do that.
Then you don't have to worry about the teeth.
I've literally locked my 4.5-inch angle grinder in a vise at 90 degrees and held the bar up against that when I didn't have one of these. But these little $40, $50 tools can save you literally $500, $600 a year just by doing your maintenance right.
Mike,
Yes, sir.
I've encountered quite a few people that really don't know what dressing a bar is. They have the spurs fully raised. Could you talk about that a little? I mean, there's some guys here that have been carving for years and apparently don't know.
Bars are basically a composite of hardened tool steel with 1.5 inches of stellite welded on the end. Stellite is about 3 times harder than your hardened tool steel. When we create too much heat, we push too hard. Running a dull chain is the worst possible thing that you guys can do out there. As soon as you start creating heat, you're softening the metal. Even the stellite gets soft. You're pushing your chain in, and you get that little tiny groove all the way around the end of your bar. That groove can either go in, or it can flare out, or a combination thereof. It looks like a mushroom on the end of your bar. Not only is it bad for the bottom of the chassis of the chain, but it also creates a lip. It creates drag when you're trying to get through it. It's a little burr that's slowing you down. Dressing your bar up is just taking that lip off, making everything smooth, flat, 90-degree angle. Yes, sir.
Now, does the paint on the bar, if it stays on there, does that mean you're not getting hot?
I don't know about not getting hot.
Like overheating?
Paint, in my mind, is another friction source. Brand new bar, I'll take a buffing pad and make mine perfectly shiny, smooth. To me, it's just one of my pet peeves. When you run your fingers across it, there's a little bit of drag. When you polish that bar, not only does it look pretty, but it's very, very smooth, a lot less drag when we're doing our thing.
Did you use the paint though as an indicator for overheating the bar?
Excuse me?
Did you use the paint as an indicator for overheating the bar because the paint starts to fall off?
On the end of our carving bars, they all turn that color when we first start using them. When you're getting the combination of a new bar and a new chain always gives you that black oil for the first 10 minutes. That's just the bar and chain creating a marriage where they're comfortable working together. Every bar is going to do that. If you want to be able to maintain a visual gauge on whether you're heating your bar up or not, once you polish that, if it changes color again, there's something wrong. Right? I've been running one for 2.5 weeks now. The first 10-15 minutes it changes color. I wipe the paint off, I wipe that color off. At the end of the day, I look at the end of the bar, it's still nice and silver. I haven't done anything wrong that day. Doesn't mean I won't tomorrow, but that day I had a good day. Anything else?
What do you mean by changing the color? You mean the bluing of the metal itself?
Blowing of the metal.
So does Stellite, can that take that, like, I don't know, if you blew
It-
tool steel, it'll take the hardness out of it, right?
Yes. If you're doing everything correctly, your bar should not need to take that. That's the whole point of doing bar maintenance. If you got your bar down to a point where you needed to dress it because there was a divot in it or a really deep gauge, dress your bar up, throw that chain up. I don't care if it was 2 weeks old, 2 days old, 2 hours old. If it's married to that bar and you dress that bar up, it's no longer married, it's not going to be happy. Throw out the $20 chain, throw out the $10 chain, put a new one on, give it 10 minutes to get comfortable, and everybody will be happy again. Do not try to save a chain, a $10 chain, with potentially wrecking a $70, $80 bar. It's just not economically sound. Go ahead.
Tightness, what do you recommend for tightness?
I couldn't hear you.
Tightness, what do you recommend for tightness?
Everybody has their own personal way they're comfortable. On a normal bar that has a sprocket tip in the end of it, I don't want any sag in it, but when I tug on it a little bit, I want to be able to see 3 drivers. On my normal carbon bars, when it's just sitting there, it's not hot, it's not cold, it's comfortable. I want to be able to see 3 drivers in the middle of that bar without touching them. A lot of it's going to depend on your carving style. I do a lot of raking side to side without doing a whole lot of cutting, driving through. That chain's going to run differently than if I'm bore cutting or if I'm just taking slabs off. It's a matter of, don't be afraid to experiment. If you ruin 5 or 6 chains in a month's time, who cares? It's going to cost you $40, $50, $60 to learn a lesson that you're going to use the whole career that you're carving. It's just a matter of how you guys feel comfortable in what is working for your bar and chain combination. I like a very deep texture on certain parts of my different carvings. I do a lot of bears. I actually run standard chain on a 3/8 or a quarter tip bar. That marriage is not a very happy marriage, and I don't use that combination other than when I need that specific texture. I can't get it with the low pro, I can't get it with quarter pitch. It's something I did by accident. I threw a standard chain, which is a much heavier duty chassis, and a much more aggressive, wider tooth. Makes a heavier curve, but it gives me the texture I want, and I found that by accident. Yeah, it's rough on the bar. But there again, you're creating $5,000, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 worth of carvings from an $89 bar. Do I have a right to complain that bar shit the bed on me? No. I got my money's worth out of it, plus it's just a matter of what works for you. A lot of things that work for me won't work for you guys, and yes sir.
Mike, you were talking a lot about dressing the bars, and it's really good to hear that. Even a professional bar rail grinder, same concept for what you have. When you get done grinding it, it puts grind marks across perpendicular to the direction of the chain. when you're done with that, especially on the Stellite, that material is harder than chain. So I've found that those little flat wheels that you have, and you can get just about anywhere, chuck them up in a drill and you buff the top surface that you've just dressed to get rid of those little cross grain hashes.
What you want is
You're polishing it.
you're getting the tool marks that are left from the rail grinders to go in the direction of the chain.
Otherwise, yeah, it
Okay,
quickly
that
eats
is
chain.
completely new to me. I've never thought of that before, and I thank you for that. You
Only,
just taught
only
me something.
because, yeah, well, school of hard knocks, you know, I mean,
It's a lot of those things that appear to be common sense, but you have no clue to until you've been exposed to that information. I do that on my finish sanding, on my tables and stuff. I do everything with a die grinder and it leaves all these chattery marks, but I don't like to finish sand anything, so I shove that off to the wife and she does all that with the oscillating sander.
it's called the art of delegation.
Oh no, she likes to do it. She likes to do it.
Yeah. It works really well anyways, just add to it, just takes that abrasive surface, especially important on the Stellite.
Yeah.
It's harder than your chain, and it eats them really quick.
Thank you, sir.
We like to sell bars, but we'd rather have you guys just use them more.
Well, we are trying to make the bars last.
Yeah, definitely. They're expensive.
Anything else out there? And I will turn it over to Captain Dave.
Chairman's next.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike. Really good.